I think by August 2022, so almost a year later, my best month yet for income was $80. But then by September of 2022, my Instagram account pretty much blew up. I went from 3,000 followers to 144,000 followers within just a matter of a few weeks.
Welcome to The Creator's Adventure, where we interview creators from around the world hearing their stories about growing a business. The creator I talk with today built an audience of almost 350,000 that helped her to achieve her dream buying a 240-acre property on her pathway towards self-sufficiency. Hey everyone, I'm Brian McAnulty, the founder of Heights Platform. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, we're here today with Katie Krejci. She is a homesteader and registered dietitian who has a passion for real food, self-sufficiency, and doing things the old-fashioned way. Katie and her husband Ryan have been homesteading for 10 years and just recently moved to their new homestead on 240 acres in the North Woods of Minnesota. Katie aims to educate and empower others to improve their health and become more self-sufficient through her blog and social media platforms. Katie, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. So my first question, which I feel like the answer is going to maybe involve homesteading, maybe I'm wrong, but is something I like to ask everybody, and that is, what is the biggest thing that you did or you are doing that has helped you to achieve the freedom to do the things that you enjoy?
I would say the biggest thing is becoming a trustworthy source of information. I feel like that is the absolute best way to build an audience, to build a brand. You know, having people trust you that you're going to provide good quality information that isn't going to fail them, hopefully. And also, at the end of the day, people need to trust you in order to buy from you too. You know, that this is going to be a good recommendation, a good source of their dollars. So really being a genuine person, putting some thought behind what you're putting out there as far as content goes. I feel like that is something that has really taken me the full way, especially having some credentials behind my name. I feel like helps a little bit too. Coming to the homesteading space as a dietitian gives me a little bit of a leg up as well. So I would say that, yeah, just being a trustworthy source of information is a great place to start, and I think has really helped propel me forward.
Yeah, I like that answer. I think I wish that more online entrepreneurs in general would be more maybe like trustworthy and honest in how they do things,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it
Mm-hmm.
relates to like their marketing. Like anytime I
Yep.
see like the like fake countdown timer that like resets itself every like hour or whatever,
Yes.
I hate those things. And so like yes, that kind of like fake urgency and stuff, like it can work and trick people sometimes, but like if they then find out, then they feel
Yeah,
bad about things. So
I
um,
totally agree.
in the
And being
long run,
mindful.
it's better to just be honest with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen, working with brands, that's a big part of it too. I am so picky about the brands that I work with. I probably turn down 95% of them. And so I will only promote ones that I personally absolutely truly believe in or use myself. And I've seen it backfire on other friends of mine or people in the same space where, the brand deals were coming in and the dollars there, it's desirable, right? It's hard to turn down good money on the table, but ultimately if you're just kind of start selling this, that, and it doesn't really fit with your brand, people can see through that and eventually it can backfire.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So, for those who are not familiar with the term, could you define what homesteading is?
Yeah, so homesteading, that's a great question. What is the official definition? I guess to me would be a way of living that is simple, kind of back to the basics, providing for yourself. And that can look a lot of different ways. So that's why it's kind of complicated. For some people, it could start just by cooking from scratch, and just saying no to restaurant food or eating out. Or it could look like having a milk cow and a big garden, or just learning how to make do with what you have, making repairs, just being self-sufficient in a way and kind of saying no to modern conveniences and being dependent on X, Y, and Z. And it looks so different from one person to another. So, yeah, any small step counts.
All right, cool. Yeah, got it. Could you share then, like, what was the moment that you realized that city living and like a job in the city, all that was not for you, and that homesteading was your true calling?
So I always knew that I wanted to live in the country. I grew up in the city, and I had one of my best friends growing up grew up on a homestead, or we called it a hobby farm back then. I don't even know if homesteading was a word at that time, but I was always so jealous. I loved to visit, and they always had a garden, all the animals, and so I always said that's what I want to do someday. And thankfully, I married a guy who grew up on a farm in Nebraska. And so he was used to that lifestyle and that's what he wanted as well. And so we started in a small little city lot for about 5 years in Kansas City and saved every penny until we could finally afford a 5 acre homestead. And that was in 2013 when we got started. So 11 years now ago. And but as far as working in the city, that was a lot more delayed. So we got our homestead in 2013. I started the garden and the chickens and was kind of slowly adding on more and more skills there, but I was still working my full-time hospital job downtown in St. Paul. And so I was commuting 2 hours a day doing that. And that took me quite I didn't necessarily, I guess, what do I want to say about that? That is a big topic. And it kind of slowly evolved as the years went on. But ultimately, come to 2021, where I had really burnt out on working in a conventional setting. It was kind of I started out loving that job. I loved the challenge. I loved being part of a care team and the challenging cases, and I learned a lot. But as the years went on, I started to really see conventional medicine as it is and my role in it. I started to really realize that I'm not helping people thrive, I'm helping them just survive, whatever
Mm,
that traumatic incident was. And I didn't really feel like I was truly helping people in a way that felt good to me, like truly healing people. And so ultimately, I did leave in 2021 and went back to school for functional nutrition. And that was such a scary but awesome moment at the same time because then I could stay at home. My plan was to work at virtual functional nutrition clinics and do telehealth, which I was so excited about to be able to get away from the city and just kind of fully detach and immerse myself on the homestead. And so I guess that's been my whole trajectory and path from moving from city life, city living, and city working to living on a homestead and working remotely as well.
yeah. Yeah, and I can understand like the point kind of about the fulfillment and how you want to help people and serve people.
Mm-hmm.
And myself, like I definitely don't have nearly the experience that you do when it comes to like nutrition and medicine, but like I really wish that more doctors knew about nutrition because
Yeah.
everything like the doctor's helping you to like put a band-aid on a problem, but not helping
Yep.
you to like stop it from the first place.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, so I think that's interesting, and I hope we can improve that. But
I
um, I'm curious, like, what were the initial challenges that you faced when starting that? Like, once I guess you moved to the 5 acre property, like at that point, and then once you left the more traditional job, did you just say like, okay, now we have to only live like sustaining ourselves here? Like, did you ever go out to like the grocery store or to a restaurant? How does that work?
So it's been a very gradual thing. I'm all about doing small steps. It's very easy to get overwhelmed and feel like you need to do all the things and be 100% self sufficient, but that's a really easy way to fail um, and also just to burn yourself out. So, um, just been gradually, I'm currently not 100% self sufficient. I really don't have a desire to be there yet, but we are getting close. So, at this, it was really challenging when I was still working full time at the hospital and commuting 2 hours a day. to be able to truly homestead in a big way, I guess. I still had a big garden. We had the chickens and everything, but I didn't have the bandwidth to keep expanding until I quit my job. So now I feel like this is my time where I'm really starting to evolve and add the skills on more quickly. We have not expanded to a lot of different animals yet because we just moved. And so we're still trying to figure out infrastructure and all of that. So I'm still
Well,
outsourcing my,
it's cold in Minnesota too, right? So
yes,
it's not like
you
you
have
moved and
to.
said, "Oh, let's live somewhere where it's always nice and sunny." Um,
Right. So it's kind of a big undertaking to get animals because you have to be prepared to take care of them in brutal winter that lasts at least 6 months. Because people ask me all the time, why don't you get goats? They'll help you clear the trails. And I'm like, oh, like that sounds great in the summertime, but come
hmm.
winter time, you really have to have a plan in place and have bring in feed because they won't be foraging in the winter as much, that type of a thing. So um, I would say we're eating and growing about 90% of our vegetables. Every once in a while, I'll outsource a vegetable or fruit, largely fruit, I guess, citrus and lemons and limes. I can't really grow those in Minnesota. The occasional banana if I'm feeling up to it. So I go to the grocery store maybe every 6 weeks, and it's mostly just a hand basket worth. And then the place where I get the majority of the things that I can't or aren't producing myself at this point is Azure Standard. They're a wonderful online, kind of like a grocery store. Have you ever heard of them before?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's a big one in my homesteading world, I guess. So it's all bulk organic goods, which is wonderful because it's hard for me to find that type of stuff at my dinky little grocery store in my small town that's
Mm,
45 minutes away. And so I can get big old bags of brown rice and oats and, big cases of cheese I can throw in the deep freeze and then I'm set for a long time, which is great. So,
yeah, that's interesting how some of the modern conveniences can still make things easier. Like you mentioned, like you're using Starlink for your internet, and
yep,
then you have that as a supplement for certain foods. That's cool. How would
yep.
you say
So,
like your background in medicine and nutrition influenced your approach, or has it really when it comes to self-sufficiency?
yeah, I guess it has and it hasn't at the same time. My initial background in the conventional world, very little overlap with my homesteading world, right? It's all antibiotics and band aid fixes and very sterile environment stuff. But I would say it did propel me to kind of be like, what's on the other side of the spectrum here and start kind of moving in that direction. Now when I went back to school for functional nutrition, that definitely married in well with my homesteading world, really learning deeply about nutrition and how it affects the body and the value of food and how to heal the body and using herbs. That's been a big part of my lifestyle as well, just learning to identify and use medicinal plants and making tinctures and salves and drying herbs. That's been a big part as well. So I guess there's been some crossover, but not too much, especially as far as my conventional training goes. It's done the opposite. It's kind of pushed me in this direction.
Yeah, I'm curious, like, so now you live on 240 acres, and like, I'm
hmm
trying to think of like how big that is. Like, that's basically a whole neighborhood for some
Yeah.
people. Like, that's their whole neighborhood. So
From our
that's a lot of land. I'm curious, like, are there any interesting stories that come to mind about like differences that you've realized or things that happened or you've discovered even on your own property with the difference between the 5 acres and 240?
Yeah. So to give you kind of a concept, our property is a mile long from front to back. It's kind of like a long, skinny shape. So it's not a mile wide, but it's a mile long. And it has been drastically different from our 5 acre property, which is what we were looking for. We were so comfortable at our 5 acre homestead that it needed to be worth it to move. And so, what we're really loving about this place is the foraging is amazing because since we have such a large tract of land, there's a lot of diverse plants. So I have my blueberry patch over here. We can find the elderberries over here, but over here is, some of my herbs, and it's just been really great to be able to find pretty much anything that I need just by going out for a walk. And then the other piece that's really serving us is hunting that we're starting to get into. That's kind of a newer thing for us. My husband grew up pheasant hunting in Nebraska, but that was about it. So we got our first deer this fall, which was great. So we were able
Mm.
to fill our freezer, and hopefully there's many more to come there. And I could definitely see us expanding to other game as well. So I think that is ultimately going to be a big part of our self-sufficiency strategy, and is also part of why I'm kind of dragging my feet on getting started with livestock. Initially, when we bought this place, we were throwing around ideas such as, oh, we could start raising cattle and sell beef and all these things. And just kind of got to a point where I was like, let's just hunt for deer. That's like, so I don't know, it just feels more natural to me, I guess. Just being a
Mm.
part of nature and immersing yourself in there and letting the land provide for you. And it's easier, right? You don't have a lot of investment. It's more unpredictable. You could go a whole season and not get one, where, having captive animals that pretty much are guaranteed to have a harvest unless something really bad goes wrong. But I'd say that's been a big liberating piece that the land will hopefully provide for us in a way outside of typical farming practices.
Do you ever
And
like expect or desire to have like more, I guess, traditional farming equipment or machinery for certain things, or do you prefer to kind of tend to avoid that?
at this point, we have no concrete plans to do that. Possibly just harvesting hay potentially, or straw, just for bedding for the animals, and the chicken coop around the in the garden is too as well. I like to do a lot of mulching, and I'm currently buying organic straw from a local farm. So if I could somehow produce at least that myself, I think that would be great. But I don't know. I keep moving further away from your traditional farming ideas and kind of getting back into just kind of surviving off the land and seeing what the land can provide for us. So it makes me question, do I call myself a homesteader then? I don't really know what I am if I'm not doing pigs and cows and, your traditional farming practices. So I'm not sure what to call myself anymore.
Cool. Yeah. Well, it's interesting to learn about. I guess let's talk more about business now. I'm curious,
Yeah.
like, I wonder, do you feel that you spend less time online or around electronics than other people? I would guess maybe yes, but I'm not sure.
I'd say that's the most surprising thing for people to hear when they think about what I'm doing all day. I think they envision that I'm just out foraging and playing in the garden and feeding the chickens all day. I do that a decent amount, but there is still a lot of time spent in here in my office behind the computer on my phone, more than I would like. And that is something I've been thinking about lately, on how I can try and back away a little bit, but it's hard when my whole business is online and connecting with people that way. So,
Yeah. I think it's something that probably people in the homesteading space might struggle with, or making money in the traditional sense.
mhm.
So for you, like, can you walk us through like what are the main activities that like you do to run your business and generate income?
Absolutely. Yeah, I wish it was so simple that, as a homesteader, you could just sell soap and, make a living off of that. Maybe some people can if they can really scale it up, but just selling extra eggs here and there isn't really going to bring in a full-time income. It'll help supplement things, and I've done it in the past. I've sold eggs at, work, or I had a small fertile egg business on the side at one point, but it mostly just kind of funded my business rather than be able to provide a full-time income. So really creating services, products, educating people, that has been my key to success. Really finding a way to create a true business around the field rather than selling products per se. There's still, definitely potential out there if you want to go be a chicken farmer, or, be a CSA, but you really kind of have to go big scale to make that pay off, to make it a true business. So, um, yeah, so for me, what my different avenues are is I created a few courses. That's been a huge avenue for me and something that brings me a lot of joy. I'm a natural educator. I love teaching people, and I feel like that's what people enjoy from me as well. I'm not necessarily an entertainer. I'm more of an educator, so that kind of works for me. And I love courses because you only have to create it once and then you can sell that for years. Eventually you'll need to update it, but it's kind of it's well worth your time to get it done as long as you're creating content on the right topics. So I definitely spend a lot of time researching ahead of time. Where are the gaps out there? What does my audience need help with? What are they craving from me? And did a lot of polls and just listening to people before I landed on my topics.
Yeah. And for those listening, if you're not familiar with Katie already, you have like 340,000 Instagram followers, I think, right?
Yeah,
So you're doing very well at that, definitely.
so far so good.
And I know besides your courses, you also have like an online community area for your members. You have any tips about like besides the research and kind of being in touch with everybody and asking them any other tips or strategies for creators out there that want to kind of like grow their own online community, keep people engaged?
Yeah, so I don't have a private community yet. I've been thinking about it. I do
Mm,
have like my own private discussion forums within each course so that if someone enrolls in the course, we can kind of chat in there. So I'd say most of my just general community is within Instagram, probably. That's my most um, engaged group. You can find me on, YouTube and Facebook and TikTok and all that too, but I'd say Instagram is the biggest one. But honestly, I feel like the best approach that has worked really well for me is just being really genuine and honest and even raw at sometimes. I'm big about saying what is important to me, even though it's not necessarily what people want to hear, if that makes any sense. Like, we'll
mm,
talk about some testy subjects, um, some like around hunting. That was a big hot button topic, this fall, or yeah, just some controversial stuff. But just having open and honest conversations, I guess it kind of makes you more approachable and more human. Or I'll talk about my own struggles. I never want it to look like I have this perfect life over here and everything is amazing. Like, there are hard days, and I'll share that, or the challenges that we've gone through in our early days to get to this point. Because it's really easy for people to see big influencers and think that they, have had everything handed to them. And it's kind of helpful to share your story and where you've been, and yeah, just makes you more approachable, I guess, and
yeah,
trustworthy.
especially like new people coming to you once you gain a certain amount of popularity. Like they just see that snapshot of now. They have no
Mm-hmm.
idea like you've been doing this for 10 years
Mm-hmm.
or for anybody however long it's taken them. So
Mm-hmm.
um but it does seem like you've grown pretty quick in the last couple years compared to before. Could you pinpoint like any specific significant factor or strategy that you believe might have been pivotal to that like growth?
For sure. So I started the Homesteading RD on Instagram in, when was that? Like September of 2021. And created my website a few months later. But it was really slow growth. It didn't take off right away. And I was just doing it as a little side hustle while I was going back to school. And then I did get a couple jobs at a couple virtual nutrition clinics doing that one on one care. And so I was just kind of doing this on the side, and it was slowly gaining traction, but not very fast. It was, I wanted to quit so many times. It was
Mm.
just like I was spending all this time and effort on evenings and weekends when I was also trying to homestead, outside of my clinic hours and building this. And um, it was just, it was a lot of work for not a lot of return there for a long time. I think by August 2022, so almost a year later, my best month yet for income was $80. And it was just
Wow.
really kind of like, all right, what am I doing here? I've been building this for almost a year, and I know money isn't everything, but at some point, you have to look at is this worth my time? What am I doing here? I'm spending all my free time doing this. But then by September of 2022, my Instagram account pretty much blew up. I went from 3,000 followers to 144,000 followers within just a matter of a few weeks. And I wish I could
Wow.
tell you exactly what it was. People ask me that all the time. And I think just all the ducks got in a row. I finally got some professional photographs taken, so my everything was looking more professional, I guess, and I was getting more comfortable in front of the camera. I think my content was getting better. It's just like I think it was just my time is the best thing I could come up
Mm.
with. I didn't necessarily change big strategies or anything, and it wasn't necessarily one reel that did well. It was just one after another was just going viral, viral, viral. And it was like, okay, where is this coming from? And at the same time, my website started to take off. And then, yeah, the rest is history. It just really started to grow from there. And I actually quit. I was working at two different virtual nutrition clinics at that time. And I quit one of them in October. So just a month later, I was like, okay, I'm going to follow this stream. And then I eventually quit the second one this past summer. So I finally cut that thread and I'm doing this full time now.
Cool, that's awesome. Yeah, I think it's really great that you shared it the way that you did of how kind of everything came together because I always like to say it's really good to try to find something to get yourself some kind of small quick win to
Mm-hmm.
allow yourself to be propelled forward because otherwise, especially like where your business is really heavily connected to social media, like it can be brutal where like the
Mm-hmm.
algorithm's just not doing anything for you. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, I spent all this time on the video, thought it was going to
Yes.
be a good one, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, great, cool, 20
It's
views or
awful.
something.
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, you really start to question yourself, like, well, when is this going to work?
Mm-hmm.
And I do think exactly what you said is true. It's not just about like, oh, I'm going to get one viral video and then it's all going to change. But the reason that the videos start to go viral is because everything else came together. That you've been
Exactly.
doing this long enough that you realize a better way to present yourself, a better
Yep.
way to explain things, more entertaining way, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
and all those things all connect. And that's when it finally starts working.
I think that's exactly right.
Awesome. And finally, I'm curious, like, what advice would you share with somebody who has been inspired by your journey? They want to start their own homesteading journey, especially if they're coming from like a non-rural background. Where would you tell them to start?
So I was in the same position. I grew up in the city, so I had no experience with farm animals or gardening. We just basically had flowers, in our landscaping beds growing up, and that was about it. I think we maybe had one fruit tree. So I guess my biggest tip is don't be afraid to fail. I still fail all the time. It's going to happen. I call it failing forward. You're always going to learn something from that failure. And my biggest tip for success when you're getting started, I think I mentioned this earlier as well, is just start small. It could just be start just cooking from scratch. There's no sense in starting a garden if you don't know how to cook with those ingredients. Because then you'll just be like more overwhelmed. Like, oh, what do I do with all this now? Start with the basics, get that down, and then just keep adding from there. And start with what's most important to you. If, you know, it's if it is a garden, that's great. Or let's say your family eats a lot of eggs, maybe do chickens. Or, maybe you love to drink kombucha and it's $5 for a bottle at the grocery store. Start brewing your own kombucha. It's really easy and a great place to start. So start with one thing. Once you feel like you've mastered it, then add on. And it could be as fast or as slow as you want. Some people like to add a new skill every week, every month, every year. Just kind of start with what you have time and the resources to do and go from there.
Yeah, that's great advice. So on the show, we like to have every guest ask a question to the audience. If you could ask anything to the audience, whether it's something you're curious about, something you want to get everybody thinking about, what would that be?
So I would love to hear what anyone else out there is making as far as small or big steps towards living a more self-sufficient lifestyle. I always love to hear what people are wanting to take on or have taken on, and just kind of sharing that excitement with each other.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much, Katie. And before we get going, where else can people find you online?
So the best places to find me, Instagram is my biggest hub. So the Homesteading RD. You can also find me on TikTok and Facebook. YouTube is kind of a newer platform for me that I'm really starting to evolve into. That's been really fun. So you can see more longer form content on just what we're up to in the homestead, kind of more vlogging content, which is new for me instead of more how-to educational. My website is also great. You can check it out at thehomesteadingrd.com. And then my courses are linked in there as well.
All right. Awesome. Thanks so much, Katie.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.